Morning everybody, welcome to IndyCar on the 1st of April 2019. So April Fool's Day is upon us, and you know, it's kind of strange. There aren't really any major April Fool gags in the news today, very few anyway. I've seen only one or two. Interestingly, one of them was an April Fool gag which was not used. Now this was an interesting one. It was not used because it was a United Kingdom Defence Journal piece which said that the European Union, one of the European Union's countries, I can't remember whether it was France, I think it was France, were planning to build an aircraft carrier and had wanted it to be assembled at the Scotstoun and Govan yards on the Clyde, but the UK government had blocked it. Now, it's a crazy sort of story, but just the kind of thing that you might expect on an April Fool's gag. But interestingly, the UK Defence Journal didn't actually use it, but they printed it anyway on their website to say that they hadn't used it, which is a curious one. And I don't know whether they hadn't used it because it might have confused the workforce into thinking that they'd lost a big order. So they then put out a story saying that they hadn't used this April Fool gag, and they heavily emphasised the fact that, in their words, their order book on the Clyde was full well into the 2030s. Now, it's interesting that they say their order book was full until the 2030s, because I pass that shipyard daily, dozens of times a day, and I can tell you that there's absolutely sod all getting built there at the moment. There are a couple of ships there that are being fitted out, that have already been finished, and the coastal patrol vessels, the three of them that they were building for somebody else, have been finished and shipped out. And the warship yard, which was to be built in order to construct the new frigates that were supposedly being ordered, the ones that started out, remember, with an order of, I think it was 15, then it went down to 13, then it went down to 8, then 3, and now 0 frigates. Well, that shed that was being built to house the factory to build those ships has not been built. They've cleared the site, they built a wall around it, but absolutely nothing is actually happening there. So despite the fact that BAE Systems claims to have a full order book well into the 2030s, they're not really looking all that busy at the moment. And we know that the orders for the frigates have actually gone back through the tendering process, so they've been pulled. The frigate order is dead, and so far we haven't heard anything about what will happen and whose bid to build the frigates will be successful, because they're competing now. Scotstoun Yard are competing against other British yards for that frigate order all over again. So I think for them to say that their order books on the Clyde are full well into the 2030s is a little bit of a stretch. Anyway, that April Fool joke didn't happen this morning, so there's a weird one for you. Other things that could have happened, I think somebody printed something this morning on Facebook that said Nicola Sturgeon had resigned, which was an obvious April Fool, and even that didn't last more than about 5 minutes before people thought, yeah, too obvious, there's nothing really particularly good about that story. Unfortunately, the biggest April Fool joke of all has got to be still Brexit. The way things are going at the moment in London, we're still at the impasse stage, and we've only got 9 days to go, because although the official date for being forced out of Europe without a deal is the 12th, the European Union is meeting on the 10th to decide whether or not the United Kingdom will be allowed to take part in the European elections. In other words, by the 10th of April, so in other words, in 9 days' time, the UK really needs to have got its act together and decided what it actually wants to do with Europe. Because at the moment, all we know is what they don't want, and this is the thing that's driving the Europeans insane. It's that the United Kingdom keeps saying what they don't want to have happen. But considering the public voted for something to happen nearly 3 years ago now, and it still hasn't happened, leads you to wonder whether the way that Brexit was sold to the public was in any way honest, because the fact that none of the parties in Westminster actually wants the Brexit deal that's been negotiated, which fulfills all of the conditions which were set for Brexit, not by the public, incidentally, but by the Prime Minister, these red lines. There's no customs union, no membership of the single market, no free movement of people. All of those red lines mean that this deal that Mrs May has managed to negotiate with the European Union is the only one there can ever possibly be. But now they're actually planning to debate the idea of Mrs May's deal without the backstop, with a built-in ejection seat that allows the UK to welch on the deal and to basically put up some kind of customs structures in the island of Ireland. I don't think that will fly, but the point is that they're at this stage now where they're going to be doing some more indicative voting this week. In other words, they're going to discuss all the things that they might want to have happen, but nobody actually can guarantee that any of it can happen. In fact, the likelihood of any of it happening is virtually zero. Mrs May, we know, is planning to try and force through a fourth vote on her deal, because remember, the whole idea of Brexit from the point of view of the Tories was to narrow the choice down to just two things: Mrs May's deal or no deal at all. And given all the rhetoric surrounding the talk of no deal was better than a bad deal, well, when you look at the actual facts of the matter, what you've got exactly is that you've got a bad deal and no deal. Those are the only two choices available to be voted on, no matter what happens with indicative votes. So the only way that things could stop would be for the Revoke Article 50 petition, which now has over 6 million signatories. And this is the biggest ever petition in the history of petitions in the United Kingdom, which now commands more support than almost anything else that's ever been proposed to Parliament. Revoking Article 50 is the only way to actually stop Brexit from happening, because everything else that's being proposed at the moment contains Brexit. So you either revoke it, which nobody in England seems to want to do, or you have no deal or Mrs May's deal, and that's really it. And they've got 9 days to decide it. And God knows what they're going to decide down there, and who knows what will happen in Parliament next. In the meantime, back here at home, the National is carrying on its front page today an examination of the benefits of a Scottish constitution. Wow, somebody finally talking in the mainstream media about Scotland's constitution and how it can help to protect Scotland from Brexit, how it guarantees the rights of human beings living here, guarantees Europeans' rights to live here, it guarantees people's rights to things like decent food, accommodation, energy that's affordable for their homes, heat, light, electricity. It guarantees education is free. It guarantees that the NHS in Scotland remains free. Prescriptions and all the rest, all of these things, it will guarantee those remain freedoms in Scotland. And it guarantees continued membership of the European Union until a time when the people of Scotland decide that they don't want that and they want something else. It guarantees us the right to choose whether we have a monarch as our head of state or not. And it guarantees so many things that for the first time in Scotland's history, since the time of Robert the Bruce himself, Scotland will have a document which describes the country, lays out the rules for everybody living in it, and gives us a definition of the powers of that country and its fundamental moral values, the ones which are written into the Constitution and which we as citizens all agree to and agree to abide by. This is something which the United Kingdom has never had, and this is the reason why the United Kingdom is in the mess that it's in now. The United Kingdom has no constitution. It has a lot of laws and customs and practices, none of which is written into any kind of constitutional document that can guarantee that those things are always going to remain. The weird thing about the United Kingdom is that it's run by a party called the Conservative Party. Now, a conservative basically means you want things to always remain the same. Except that at the moment, the Conservatives want things not to remain the way they are now, as in, what we have at the moment with the European Union. They want to regress back more than 40, maybe 50 years into the past, to a time when we weren't members of the European Union, when we didn't have the security of being in a trade organisation where there was a level playing field and where we didn't pay taxes on imports and exports, to a time when there was chaos in the United Kingdom, where there was hyperinflation, where the pound value kept plunging, where governments, both Labour and Conservative, could not control the workforce. There were strikes every week. There was 3-day working weeks. There were rolling blackouts caused by striking miners and striking workers of all kinds. The UK was a complete basket case before it joined the European Union. And now it's a basket case again, but without any guarantees for its citizens. It has no constitutional guarantees. So the people of the United Kingdom and the so-called conservatives cannot conserve anything, because there's nothing to enshrine those values. There's nothing to fix those laws in place, and there's no permanence to anything in the United Kingdom. All of it can be shuffled around and changed at the whim of politicians who seem to be completely unaccountable to the people who voted for them, and they seem to be completely out of control when it comes to performing what the public has asked them to do in a legally now binding referendum, originally an advisory one, but now the government has chosen to make it binding. The government is just not providing what the public voted for in England. So at a time when all of that is going on, Scotland can now demonstrate that with its own constitution, we can guarantee that these sorts of calamities could never happen here. But at the moment, we have no constitution other than what's already been written in 1320, and more recently in the Claim of Right, which basically reinforces the rights of Scots to full sovereignty in deciding how they're governed. So, at the bottom of all of this waffle I've been giving this morning, there is the fact that now the Scottish media is beginning to take up the challenge of talking about the Scottish Constitution as a part of independence. And I welcome this today. I'm very glad the National has started to talk about it. I also know that Women for Independence have been talking about constitutions. I'm not sure which version they were talking about, possibly the one produced by Commonweal. But the Commonweal version of the Constitution, I can tell you, having read it, although it's very good, is nothing like the depth and breadth of the new Constitution written by Mark McNaught and put to the people for amendments, and now resting at Holyrood waiting to be debated. At the moment, it's being held in abeyance just now, and the wording of the proposal that's been put for the Constitution at Holyrood is that it will confirm Scotland's independence. So I take from that wording that they mean after independence has been won, the Constitution will then be debated and voted on, and that will cement Scotland's state into place and give us all the structure that I was talking about, where we know where we stand, we know what our rights are, we know what our responsibilities are, and we know that Scottish governments, unlike England's governments, will not be able to change the rules to suit themselves. That we will all have to work within the framework of our Constitution, and that human rights will be guaranteed. We would be able to take our government to court to challenge any infringements under our Constitution. Unlike the American Constitution, there is not going to be the legal right to bear arms. Now, we know that that's caused terrific problems in America for decades, with something like over 70,000 gun deaths every year in America, more, in fact, than some road traffic accidents. So we know that gun deaths in America are a big problem. We won't have that problem here. Our Constitution will not give that right to individuals. In fact, Scotland's Constitution will define its defensive arrangements as being largely that, defensive only. Scotland will will find a way to create a defensive force that suits its needs and defends against the threat which actually exists against Scotland. But remember, Scotland's stance will not be a war-fighting, warmongering one. We will not be sending aircraft carriers full of bomb-laden planes to Yemen or anywhere else for that matter. Our response is going to be, we're not going to bring our planes, we're not going to aggressively intervene in other countries. So our defensive needs will be less. But anyway, the whole point of what I'm saying this morning is that despite it being April Fool's Day, there's been very little joking today in the press about anything. Knife crime is spiralling out of control, and violence on the streets now because of Brexit is starting to take place. Scottish MPs are being abused and hounded in the streets by mobs of roaming Brexit supporters, some of them women, making threats and following MPs to their homes, threatening them verbally on the way home. This has never happened before. Telling Scots MPs to go back to their own country, like Scotland some kind of foreign land. I thought we were supposed to be part of a union of equals, part of this loving family of nations, and yet we're being told to go home by our own supposed countrymen and women in the streets of the capital of the United Kingdom. The country's coming apart at the seams. Brexit has exposed a nasty racist streak in the British psyche, and the British psyche, I really mean in some of the some parts of England. There's a deep racist streak against Scots. I've had several insulting messages today from English Brexiters saying things like, "You jocks, say this, you jocks voted today," and now, I don't know about you, but being called "you jocks" is a racist, pejorative term to me, and so I was very quick to fire back at this guy that we didn't accept racist terms in Scotland, and we wouldn't accept being racially abused by anybody from the United Kingdom who's supposedly part of the same country as us. Pressures to break the United Kingdom up are not coming from Scotland anymore, they're coming from England itself. England is pushing back at the Celtic nations saying, "We don't want you anymore, you're foreigners, you disagree with our Brexit, we don't want you in our country." It's getting to the point now where this racism and this right-wing ideology is getting more frightening by the day. It was pointed out yesterday that the flute band, which came from Livingston, went down to London to march around and parade this sectarian bigotry in London streets, was actually sponsored by a Scottish fishing family. A fishing family who were fishermen for leave, or fishing for leave, were sponsoring the bigotry in London. So just ask yourself this question. The next time you see old Bertie going on about Scotland's fishing rights, just remember what he and his ilk have sponsored in London. They were the ones who paid for the bigotry in Livingston to be exported to London and paraded on the streets on the BBC News. This is the level that unionists in Scotland are linking up with sectarian, bigoted organisations and sponsoring them to march in front of television cameras in London. To me, this says that the union is now over. The only remaining unionists in Scotland are primarily far-right Tories and far-right sectarian bigots. And if that's the case, then independence will be a welcome relief from that, because that kind of sectarian bigotry will be illegal under the new constitution, and anybody caught speaking that way, or talking that way, or sponsoring that kind of bigotry, sectarianism, or any kind of insulting behaviour of that sort, will just be put in the jail, because Scotland doesn't need it. We don't support it, we don't espouse it. As far as we are concerned, Scotland is an inclusive country, welcomes people of all faiths and people without faith. There is no reason why Scotland needs non-Irish sectarianism imported into it. And that goes for football matches, and it goes for anywhere at all in Scotland. Sectarianism is a thing of the past. It was invented by the British state to keep control over Northern Ireland's territories that they had seized and are still clinging to. At the end of the day, there can't really be any laughter on this April Fool's Day, because it's really not April Fool's Day. This is the beginning of April Fool's Week. And the only fools are the MPs in Westminster who they changed Brexit at this late stage. They can't change it. There isn't the time to do it. The European Union has run out of patience with us, and I don't blame them in any way for that, because they have bent over backwards to try to please the English Brexiters. Give them what they've got what they wanted. They don't seem to want to vote for it. But is that our problem? No. Did we bring this upon them? No. Scotland has said from the outset that we don't want Brexit. Now, the feeling against Brexit in Scotland is even higher than it was in 2016, 56% to oppose Brexit. Now that sentiment is over 70%. So we're at a critical point. We all know this. Every single week seems to be a critical point in the life of the English Tory government. But when our national newspaper in Scotland and our national media here is now starting to talk about the Scottish Constitution, you know that the Scottish government, the SNP and the Greens are all pushing now for independence. They're waiting for the right moment to announce it. And the right moment to announce it will be when Brexit is inevitable and unstoppable. And it doesn't matter which kind of Brexit it is. Whether it's a soft Brexit, a hard Brexit, a green Brexit, a yellow Brexit, a Brexit means Brexit, a full English Brexit. Who cares what kind of Brexit it is? But as soon as it's inevitable and it begins to happen, that's the time when we will vote to leave, because that's the time when the mandate is triggered. The mandate is triggered by being taken out of the EU without our consent. That hasn't happened yet. The United Kingdom is ridiculous. It's been sitting on this fence for 3 years. It will not jump off the fence on one side or the other. It's teetering there saying, yes, you voted for us to go out of Europe, but we're not going to let you do it. We're going to keep faffing around. We're going to keep having needless votes and keep delaying it for as long as possible, hopefully so that the people who voted for it will die off and they'll have forgotten what Brexit was. It's not going to happen. There's going to be trouble on the streets. There already is in London, trouble on the streets. And it seems that Scottish fishermen are reporting more sectarian troublemakers onto the streets and paying for them to go to London. A ridiculous state of affairs. Scottish fishing families are paying paying sectarian bigots to travel to London to parade in front of the cameras, all part of calling for this great British Brexit. It's comedy. It really is comedy. People in Scotland are incredulous at what's going on. If there's a laugh coming from April Fool's Day, it's the Scots laughing at the Brexiteers at the moment, because it is the funniest show in town. It is the most ridiculous load of nonsense that's ever happened politically to the UK, and I think rightly so. The UK is the laughing stock of the globe at the moment. Anyhow, I'm afraid there isn't really any actual proper news this week other than what I've stated, which is that Scotland's constitution is being debated, and we have a constitution which is lodged at Holyrood. It's ready to be voted on. We're sitting, waiting, ready to go like the rest of us. All we have to do is wait for another 9 days until the crisis comes to a head and we either crash out of the EU or the Tories and the Labour MPs down in London finally decide reluctantly to vote for Mrs May's deal rather than crash out, or they cancelled anyway. But whatever happens, it won't be good for the United Kingdom. It certainly won't be good for Scotland. And at that moment, that's the time that we have to announce that we're leaving. We could actually suspend the Act of Union so that we can then take the time to have a referendum without the British government trying to shut it down. I'm not sure how that would be done, not being a legal ego, but I suspect something like that might need to be done. We'll see. Anyway, have a happy April Fool's Day, and remember, don't be bogus. But I think the most ridiculous story of all still is Brexit. And 10 years ago, if somebody had printed a story saying you're going to leave the European Union in 9 days on April Fool's Day, not a single person 10 years ago would have thought it possible. But here we all are, waiting to fall out of the European Union and waiting so that Scotland can declare its independence from this mess that the United Kingdom has become. Welcome to the end of the British Empire, everybody, and happy April Fool's Day.